As the story goes, shortly after my third birthday, the neighborhood my parents and I lived in at the time suffered a period of house burglaries. Someone tried to break into the house we rented on 2 separate occasions before they finally succeeded the third time around. My father moved us in with his aunt across town until he and my mother saved up enough money for a down payment on a new home. It took them 2 years, but finally the day came when we had our own place again. I loved our new house. It was much larger than the previous one. So was our new backyard. And unlike the gravel, concrete, and dirt before, this new yard had plenty of lush green grass. But as the saying goes, every coin has 2 sides. And I don't remember a lot about being 5 years old, but I do remember my nightmares, and they started once we moved into that new house. Every morning, when my mother woke me for school, I would ramble on to her all the vivid details about the various monsters that were coming to get me in my dreams, all of them creeping out of the darkest crevices of our new basement. Back then, I suffered from allergies miserably, and I took daily medications as a result. One of the most common side effects of those meds was nightmares. So understandably, my parents were convinced my medicine was the only cause of my sleeping issues. They were wrong. The nightmares occurred almost every night. This occurred for months. And then one day, they just stopped. I was still on the same medications, but I was no longer having any bad dreams. Just like I don't remember having any before we moved in that house. Of course, my parents had adult complexities to worry about back in those days. And as far as my nightmares were concerned, I'm sure they were just grateful they didn't have to hear me talking their heads off about them every morning any longer. It wasn't until years later that my parents revealed a tidbit of information that finally solved the entire mystery for me. We were at a family gathering, sitting around a dining table and sharing old stories. My mother told the story about the crazy man who had threatened Dad some years prior over a rusty old toolbox. The crazy man had lent his toolbox to a friend. The two of them had a falling out, and the friend moved out of town before returning the toolbox to the man. The toolbox had been in the man's family for a long time, and he desperately wanted it back. And apparently he was willing to do anything for it, including hurting people. My parents and I had moved into the friend's old house. That rusty old toolbox was sitting under a sink in our new basement. Somehow, the crazy man found out where his property was and came looking for it. And after a long shouting match with Dad, the crazy man got his toolbox back. I had long forgot all about that random argument my dad had gotten into on our front steps that day. I always simply remembered that day as the one where my nightmares ended.